Loneliness is not a flaw in your character. It is not a sign of failure or inadequacy. It is, in essence, a signal, a profound, unignorable call from your very being that something essential is missing. Much like the pangs of hunger remind you to nourish your body, loneliness is the mind's way of urging you to seek connection. It's not something to suppress, to push away, or to hide. It's something to understand, to listen to, and ultimately to act upon. In the silence of loneliness, there is a truth waiting to be heard. It whispers of the human condition, of our deep, almost instinctual need for community. From the earliest days of humanity, our survival depended on one another. We thrived in tribes, protected by the bonds we formed. To be alone in the wild was to be vulnerable, exposed, and in danger. And while the modern world no longer leaves us to face prowling predators in the dark, the emotional experience of isolation feels just as perilous. The loneliness you feel today is a vestige of that primal instinct, a reminder of your intrinsic need for others, not just for survival, but for meaning. But here's the paradox. Loneliness, while painful, is also deeply personal. It doesn't merely signify the absence of people around you. You could be surrounded by crowds and still feel utterly alone. What you're truly craving isn't the presence of just anyone, it's connection, understanding, and resonance. The heart yearns for someone who truly sees you, for a bond that assures you that your existence matters. It's not about the quantity of relationships, but their quality, and recognizing this is the first step toward addressing the ache that loneliness brings. Now let's reflect on the way we perceive loneliness. So often people view it as a weakness, a condition that reflects poorly on the individual experiencing it. We are bombarded with images of friendships, parties, and laughter on social media, creating a relentless pressure to prove that we too are connected, loved, and part of the crowd. But this facade is deceptive. The truth is, almost everyone has felt the sting of loneliness at some point in their lives. Even those who seem surrounded by companions can harbor a profound sense of isolation. The world is full of people pretending they don't feel alone. Be kind, the saying goes, for everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. The problem is, loneliness is easy to mask but hard to address. It requires courage to admit, even to yourself, that you feel disconnected. And yet, acknowledging it is a powerful act of self-awareness. It's saying to yourself, something within me needs attention. That moment of realization is not a weakness, it's a strength. To identify what you lack and to strive toward fulfilling it is one of the most courageous things you can do. But loneliness is not an enemy to be defeated. It is a teacher. It demands your attention because it carries wisdom. When you feel lonely, it is an opportunity, a painful one, yes, but a profound one, to look inward. What is it that you truly need? What connections do you seek, and why? Are you yearning for validation, understanding, or simply the presence of someone who makes you feel less alone in the world? The answers are not always comfortable, but they are necessary. Loneliness strips away pretense and brings you face to face with your own humanity. We often think of connections as something external, something out there waiting for us to find. But sometimes the first connection we need to build is with ourselves. When you're lonely, the instinct might be to fill the void as quickly as possible. Reach out to anyone, be with anyone, just to make the feeling stop. But that approach often leads to shallow relationships that only deepen the emptiness over time. Instead, take the time to understand who you are and what you value. As you become more grounded in yourself, you'll find that the connections you build will be more meaningful and enduring. And let's not forget that reaching out, as simple as it may seem, is one of the most difficult things to do when you feel lonely. There's a vulnerability in admitting you want connection. It feels like exposing a wound, and there's always the fear that your efforts will be rejected. But this is where courage comes in. The willingness to take that first step, to say I'd like to talk or I could use a friend, is an act of bravery. It's a reminder that loneliness does not define you. Your actions do. Consider this. Some of the greatest works of art, literature, and philosophy were born out of loneliness. Isolation has a way of sharpening the mind, of turning the gaze inward, and asking questions that the noise of everyday life drowns out. It is in these moments of solitude that many have discovered their deepest truths. Rumi, the great poet, wrote, "Don't turn away. Keep your gaze on the bandaged place. That's where the light enters you." Loneliness, as painful as it is, can be the very place where healing begins. But remember, loneliness does not last forever, not if you refuse to let it. It's a signal, not a sentence. It's a moment in time, not your identity. And while it may feel overwhelming now, it carries within it the seeds of growth. Each small step you take, whether it's reaching out to someone, joining a community, or simply acknowledging your feelings, is a step toward connection. It's a step toward the kind of life you want to lead. One where you feel seen, valued, and understood. So when loneliness comes knocking, don't be afraid of it. Don't see it as an enemy or a failure. Instead, treat it as a messenger. Listen to what it's telling you about your needs, your desires, and your values. Use it as a guide to take action, no matter how small. And above all, remember that you are not alone in feeling lonely. It is part of being human, and it is something you have the strength to overcome. Your value is not defined by your social circle, and this truth is more profound than it may first appear. It is easy in a world that celebrates connections and communities to feel like your worth is somehow diminished if you lack a robust network of friends or companions. Society, with its constant imagery of togetherness, has cultivated the illusion that those with many friends are inherently more valuable, more deserving, more whole. But this is a dangerous misconception, one that can lead you to tie your self-worth to external validation, leaving you feeling adrift and unseen when relationships waver or fade. The truth is, your value is intrinsic. It is not something that others bestow upon you through their approval or presence. It is not measured by the number of people you can call at a moment's notice or the size of the gatherings you attend. Your worth exists simply because you exist. You are valuable because you are a human being, unique in your thoughts, your dreams, and your potential. As Eleanor Roosevelt once said, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." If you allow your sense of self to hinge on the opinions or presence of others, you relinquish control over your own identity. But let's pause for a moment to understand why this illusion is so pervasive. From an early age, we are taught to seek approval. The smiles of our parents, the praise of our teachers, the camaraderie of our peers, all these affirmations shape how we view ourselves. And while there is nothing inherently wrong with valuing relationships, the danger lies in equating the presence of others with the presence of self-worth. Relationships can enhance your life, yes, but they cannot define it. When you place your value in the hands of others, you become vulnerable to their absence, their judgments, and their flaws. Consider this. Would you regard a diamond as worthless simply because it is hidden in the earth, unseen by human eyes? Of course not. Its value remains irrespective of whether anyone recognizes it. The same is true of you. Your worth does not depend on visibility or validation. It is inherent, like the diamond's brilliance, waiting to be uncovered and appreciated, first and foremost, by yourself. End of section 4. Responsibility and regret. The challenge, of course, is that we are social creatures. It is natural to crave connection, to want to be understood and valued by others. And there is beauty in that longing. It speaks to the depth of our capacity for empathy and love. But the danger comes when that longing becomes a need so consuming that it blinds us to our own worth. You are not a reflection of those who surround you. You are not merely an echo of their opinions. You are your own, a being with thoughts and feelings and a story that is yours alone. It is in solitude, sometimes, that this truth becomes most apparent. When you are alone, without the distraction of others' expectations or judgments, you are left to confront yourself. It can be uncomfortable, even painful, to face the silence and ask, who am I without them? But this question is not one to fear. It is one to embrace. For in answering it, you begin to uncover the depths of your own character. You begin to see that your value is not conditional, not dependent on whether others notice or acknowledge it. It simply is. The journey to internalize this truth is not always easy. It requires unlearning years, perhaps decades of conditioning. It requires standing firm in a world that often equates popularity with success and solitude with failure. But consider the words of Viktor Frankl, who wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." If the presence or absence of others feels beyond your control, then turn inward and recognize the power you hold over your own perception of self. This is not to say that relationships do not matter. They do. Connections with others can bring joy, meaning, and growth. But they are not the foundation of your worth. They are the embellishments on an already solid structure. If you build your sense of self on the shifting sands of external validation, you will always feel unsteady. But if you root your value in the unshakable truth of your own existence, you will find a strength that cannot be taken from you. Let's think for a moment about the people we admire most. Are they defined by the number of friends they have or the popularity they enjoy? Or are they defined by their character, their principles, their actions? True greatness comes from within. It comes from living in alignment with your values, from pursuing your passions, and from striving to be the best version of yourself. not because others are watching, but because it matters to you. There will be times in your life when you feel isolated, when your social circle feels smaller than you'd like, or when relationships that once sustained you fade away. These moments can feel like a void, as though something essential has been lost. But they are also opportunities to grow, to reflect, and to rediscover the essence of who you are. They are reminders that while others can enhance your journey, the journey is yours alone. And by making sure that you have something that nobody else can, you will be proved to yourself and your journey that in those moments, remember that your value is not something that fluctuates based on the presence or absence of others. It is not a currency that rises and falls with social interactions. It is constant, steady, and enduring. It is the core of who you are, unchanging and unyielding, even in the face of loneliness or rejection. And so, when you find yourself doubting your worth, ask yourself, who are you when no one is watching? What qualities do you hold dear? What dreams inspire you? What principles guide you? These are the questions that define your value, not the opinions of others, not the size of your social circle, not the fleeting moments of approval or disapproval. Your worth lies in your character, your integrity, and your resilience. Life is not a popularity contest. It is a journey of self-discovery and growth. It is about becoming the person you are meant to be, not for the applause of others, but for the quiet satisfaction of knowing that you are living authentically. As the poet Mary Oliver once wrote, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" Your answer to that question will shape your worth far more than the opinions of anyone else ever could. In the end, your value is not defined by your social circle. It is defined by you, by your actions, your choices, and your beliefs. It is not something that can be given or taken away by others. It is yours, and it always has been. Recognize it, embrace it, and let it guide you forward. Loneliness is not an endpoint. It is a crossroads. It is a moment in your life where the absence of connection leaves space for space that, while painful, is brimming with potential. Struggles, especially the silent ones, are rarely pleasant, but they are always significant. They call you to pay attention to the parts of yourself that need care and change. Loneliness, in its raw and unrelenting nature, can feel like a weight pressing down on your chest, a reminder of your separation from others. Yet within that weight lies the opportunity to rise, to transform struggle into strength, and to find a path forward that leads not only to connection, but to empowerment. Life is full of inevitable challenges, and one of the most universal is the experience of being alone. It can happen gradually, like a tide receding so slowly you hardly notice, or it can hit suddenly, leaving you gasping for air in its wake. Either way, it feels like a void, a disconnection from the world around you. But this experience, as isolating as it may seem, holds a mirror to your innermost self. Loneliness forces you to confront who you are without the validation or distraction of others. And that confrontation, while deeply uncomfortable, is where the seeds of growth begin to sprout. When you find yourself in the grip of loneliness, it is tempting to see it as a flaw, a failure, or a burden to bear. But what if instead you viewed it as a signal, a signpost, pointing you toward the work that must be done? There is a quote often attributed to Carl Jung: "What you resist persists." The more you try to deny or suppress loneliness, the more power it seems to gain over you. But when you face it head on, when you acknowledge it and listen to what it's telling you, you reclaim your agency. You stop being a passive participant in your struggle and start becoming an active architect of your future. The first step in transforming loneliness into empowerment is understanding its message. Loneliness tells you that connection matters to you, that relationships and belonging are central to your well-being. This realization is not a weakness, it's a testament to your humanity. It's a reminder that we are social creatures by nature, wired to seek out community and collaboration. But it's also a reminder that the first connection you need to build is with yourself. Before you can truly connect with others, you must understand who you are, what you value, and what you need. The solitude that comes with loneliness can be an invitation to self-discovery. It is in these moments of quiet that you can begin to ask the difficult questions. What kind of person do I want to be? What do I stand for? What do I bring to the relationships in my life? These are not easy questions to answer, but they are essential. They force you to dig deep, to uncover parts of yourself that may have been buried beneath the noise of daily life. And in doing so, you begin to build a stronger, more resilient foundation for your sense of self. It is important to recognize that loneliness, while painful, is not permanent. It is a state, not a destiny. And like all states, it can be changed. But the change begins with action, no matter how small. Often, when we feel isolated, we fall into the trap of inaction. We tell ourselves that no one will care, that reaching out is pointless, that things will never get better. But these thoughts are not truths. They are fears. And fears, while powerful, can be overcome. Consider the power of small steps. When you feel disconnected, the idea of forging new connections or rebuilding old ones can feel overwhelming. But you don't have to leap. You only have to take one step forward. That step might be as simple as sending a message to someone you've lost touch with, joining a group that aligns with your interests, or even just smiling at a stranger. These actions may seem insignificant, but they are not. They are acts of courage, and courage is the antidote to fear. Transformation often begins in the smallest of moments. It is the decision to show up, to try, even when it feels futile. It is the willingness to be vulnerable, to let others see the parts of you that you may not be proud of. Vulnerability, as Brené Brown has so eloquently put it, is not a weakness. It is the birthplace of connection, creativity, and courage. When you allow yourself to be seen, you create the possibility for others to connect with you on a deeper level. But empowerment does not only come from connection, it also comes from contribution. One of the most effective ways to combat loneliness is to focus on how you can make a difference in the lives of others. When you shift your focus from what you are lacking to what you can give, you begin to see yourself as someone who has value, someone who can bring light to the world. Volunteer your time. Offer a listening ear. Share your skills. These acts of generosity not only benefit others, but also remind you of your own capacity to create meaning and connection. There is a profound truth in the idea that struggles, when faced with intention and effort, become the very things that strengthen us. Just as a muscle grows stronger through resistance, so too does the spirit grow stronger through adversity. The pain of loneliness, while undeniable, is a crucible. It has the potential to forge resilience, empathy, and a deeper understanding of yourself and others. It teaches you to appreciate connection when it comes, to value the moments of togetherness that might otherwise be taken for granted. As you navigate the journey from loneliness to empowerment, remember that you are not alone in your struggle. Every person you meet has faced moments of isolation, even if they do not show it. Be kind, said Plato, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle. This shared humanity is a reminder that connection is always possible, even when it feels out of reach. You are not an island, no matter how distant you may feel. You are part of a greater whole, and your presence within it matters. The process of turning struggle into strength is not linear. There will be setbacks, moments when the weight of loneliness feels too heavy to bear. But even in those moments, you have the power to choose how you respond. You can choose to see loneliness not as a verdict, but as a call to action. You can choose to take one step forward, to reach out, to contribute, to grow. And with each choice, you move closer to the life you want to lead. Your struggle is not the end of your story. It is a chapter, and like all chapters, it holds lessons that will shape the person you are becoming. Do not shy away from it. Do not let it define you. Instead, let it refine you. Let it be the catalyst for transformation, the spark that ignites your journey toward empowerment. You are stronger than you realize, and your capacity for growth is limitless. Struggle may shape you, but it does not have to break you. In fact, it can build you. And when you emerge from the other side, you will not only have found connection, you will have found yourself. The power of reaching out lies not in grand gestures or dramatic overtures, but in the small, deliberate acts that bridge the gap between isolation and connection. It's a truth so simple yet so profound that we often overlook it. Every meaningful relationship, every profound connection begins with a single step. Reaching out is not just an act of courage, it is an act of hope. It is the acknowledgement that despite the fear of rejection, despite the vulnerability it demands, the possibility of connection is worth the risk. When you reach out to another person, you are engaging in an extraordinary act of humanity. You are saying, I see you, I hear you, and I want to be part of your world. In doing so, you open the door to something transformative, not only for the other person, but for yourself as well. There is a line from Maya Angelou that resonates deeply. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. In the small, often unnoticed moments of reaching out, you have the power to make someone feel seen, valued, and understood. And in turn, you remind yourself that you are capable of creating meaningful connections. But let's not pretend it's easy. The act of reaching out can feel daunting, especially when you're in the grips of loneliness. That inner voice of doubt, the one that whispers, "What if they don't respond? What if they don't care?" can be deafening. It's easier to stay silent, to retreat into the safety of your own world, even as it grows smaller and smaller. But consider this: the cost of inaction is often greater than the risk of rejection. When you reach out, you create the possibility of connection. When you don't, you ensure its absence. There's a misconception that connection requires perfection, that you need to have the perfect words, the perfect timing, the perfect circumstances. But life is not perfect, and neither are people. What matters is not the polish of your approach, but the sincerity of your intent. A simple "how are you" can carry more weight than you realize. A genuine smile, a kind gesture, a moment of shared laughter. These small actions are the threads that weave the fabric of connection. They may seem insignificant in isolation, but together they create something enduring. Reaching out is also an acknowledgement of vulnerability, and vulnerability is not weakness, it is strength. It is the willingness to show up, to be seen, to say, "Here I am, imperfect and human, but ready to connect." Vulnerability is what makes us relatable. It is what makes us real. When you reach out from a place of authenticity, you give others permission to do the same. You create a space where honesty and empathy can flourish. And while the act of reaching out may feel like a gift you are offering to others, it is equally a gift to yourself. In those moments of connection, you remind yourself of your own capacity for compassion and courage. You remind yourself that you are not as alone as you might feel. Because here's the thing about connection: it is a two-way street. When you extend your hand, you invite someone else to do the same. When you share your story, you create a space for theirs. When you show kindness, you open the door for kindness to return. But let's not ignore the reality that reaching out can sometimes lead to disappointment. Not every effort will be met with the response you hope for. People are complex, and their ability to connect often depends on their own circumstances, fears, and struggles. This is not a reflection of your worth. Rejection, while painful, is not an indictment of who you are. It is a part of life, a reminder that connection is a dance that requires two willing partners. And even in rejection, there is growth. Each attempt teaches you resilience. Each no moves you closer to the yes that will make all the difference. The key is to persist, to continue reaching out, even in the face of uncertainty. You may not know the impact of your actions immediately, or ever, but that does not make them any less valuable. Sometimes the smallest gestures have the greatest impact, rippling outward in ways you cannot see. You might send a message to someone who is silently struggling, and that message might be the light they need in a dark moment. You might extend kindness to a stranger, and that kindness might inspire them to do the same for someone else. These are the quiet, often invisible ways in which connection changes the world. There is a story I once heard about a man walking along a beach covered in stranded starfish. One by one, he began throwing them back into the sea. A passerby scoffed, "There are thousands of starfish here. You can't possibly make a difference." The man picked up another starfish, threw it into the water, and replied, "I made a difference for that one." Reaching out is much the same. You may not be able to connect with everyone or solve every problem, but for each person you touch, for each connection you make, you create something meaningful. And don't underestimate the ripple effect of small steps. Joining a community, saying hello to a neighbor, offering a kind word to a colleague. These actions may seem inconsequential, but they lay the foundation for deeper connections. Over time, they build a network of relationships that sustain and enrich your life. The journey to meaningful connection is not about grand gestures. It is about consistency, intention, and the courage to take that first step. Ultimately, reaching out is about hope. It is a declaration that you believe in the possibility of connection, that you are willing to risk vulnerability for the chance to find something real. It is an act of defiance against the voice of loneliness that tells you to stay silent, to withdraw, to give up. And it is a reminder that no matter how alone you may feel, you are never truly alone in your desire for connection. Life is a series of moments, each offering a choice. You can choose to remain in your bubble, safe but isolated, or you can choose to step forward, to reach out, to create the connections that make life meaningful. It is not an easy choice, but it is a worthwhile one. Because in those moments of connection, however fleeting, you find the essence of what it means to be human. You find empathy, understanding, and a sense of belonging. You find the reminder that your presence matters, not just to others, but to the world. Reaching out is not just an act, it is a mindset. It is the belief that connection is always possible, even in the face of fear or uncertainty. It is the understanding that small steps can lead to big changes, that vulnerability can lead to strength, and that each attempt, no matter the outcome, is a victory in itself. So, take that first step. Send the message, make the call, extend the hand. Extend the hand, because when you do, you are not just reaching out, you are reaching forward toward a life filled with connection, meaning, and hope.